been asked to address three questions. The first one is, what were the challenges to establish the Truth Commission for El Salvador and carrying out its work? Well, first of all, some of the problems we had, the civil war which was carried out in El Salvador lasted for 12 years, with victims, 700,000 victims in those 12 years. That was one of the problems. The other problem was that the government that actually carried out was part of the civil war was still in power, and so were the guerrillas who were fighting the government. And the other problem was that we were supposed to finish our report in 6 months. So those were some of the difficulties. The advantages might be also, we might want to look at that. It was a small country. El Salvador only has 5 million people, so it wasn't that much of a problem. But the fact that we were 3 foreigners made it quite difficult, because it took us about 3 months to get to really know what the problems of the country were. So that's basically, I would say, where the challenges. Also, of course, the challenges had much to do with the fact also that we didn't know each other and had never worked together. So that took some time. But I think that's probably most of the challenges. The big difficulty was, of course, the fact that the war lasted for 12 years, and that both of the combatants, were still in power while we were doing the investigation. So that's the first question. The second question was, what were the greatest accomplishments of the Commission? Well, of course, as a member, we always start with the assumption that we accomplished a great deal. But the truth of the matter is that the advantage we had was that the country was full of rumors about what happened, and nobody believed anybody. There was a continuous rumors, wrong lies, and everything else about what happened in the Civil War. And so that was something we had to deal with, and deal with not only in a way that one had problems believing what people were saying, but also that we were taken seriously as far as our findings were concerned. So what I consider the greatest achievement is that the fact that all of the people we accused of committing all kinds of criminal offenses, we were never criticized for the findings. We were told we were arrogant, and I suppose that I accept as a valid criticism. But not that we made a big mistake, that somebody we accused was not in the country. None of these accusations sprang up. And that, I think, was a very important accomplishment, and had the advantage then that both sides basically accepted our conclusions, even if they didn't like them. And that it doesn't happen all that often. Now, the third question was, what lessons do you think the Commission provides regarding transitional justice in today's context? And I'm not always that sure that there are many lessons to be drawn, because our composition and our work and the experience of El Salvador are relatively unique. For example, most truth commissions whether Chile, Argentina, or South Africa, the commissioners were all natives, with maybe one or two exceptions. We were all foreigners. Number two, the country is much smaller than most of the countries where truth commissions were established. So it depends really on the countries where conflict takes place, whether you can use one experience or not from another group. I'm looking at my notes, I asked myself, could we have profited from the experience of others? Again, the problem is the same. Argentina is a big country, Brazil is a big country, South Africa is a big country. The situation in El Salvador was so different, and our composition was so different, that I'm not so sure that one could learn very much from it. What I think made it possible for us to come out successful was the fact that we each three commissioners, I think, respected each other and felt that the other was not somebody who was going to identify or support the government or support another side, which was strange, because when I was first nominated to the commission, some of my friends said, "You're going to be squeezed with the former president of Colombia and the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela, and you as an academic are going to have to deal with this problem." It wasn't a problem at all. As a matter of fact, we worked so well together that's probably the greatest success of our work. So I really think that it depends on the country whether you could use a truth commission that is composed of foreigners or not. In most cases, I would say it's not a good idea. But in a small country, where everybody knows each other, where rumors would come up, where stuff would be leaking from the moment you started writing your report, here, the fact that we were foreigner, and our staff was all foreigner, made a big difference. And I think that is something to take into account or to consider, pro or con, when one deals with another truth commission in any different part of the world. I should also add something that, for example, I've always thought that when one had to deal with Germany, for example, after the war, one of course had Nuremberg. But Nuremberg they were trials. I always thought Germany would have benefited a great deal from not only having the trials in Nuremberg, but also a truth commission. Because trials deal with only specific issues, and they don't take into account the history, the sources of all of the problems that were created. Whereas if you had a truth commission, it would have been probably easier for Germany to get over its past once its history had been properly studied, the causes of Nazism had been taken into account, and the reasons for it. So I think if I were asked, is it enough to have just a truth commission or trials, I would say the two would be much more useful to have two of those institutions dealing with very serious domestic problems like a civil war.